Hi everyone, Felipe here for Get a Grip, and in this episode we're going to be talking about Final Cut Pro 10, but not anymore about the past, we're going to be talking about the future. What is it that Final Cut Pro 10 is bringing us and is going to bring us in the future? And of course we're going to speculate a lot, and together with us we have Brad Olsen, the director of Off the Tracks. So let's not wait anymore, let's roll that light. Oh!
I'm assuming you guys have been in situations where you've one-man banded or just had you and an assistant go on a shoot, right? And you produced...
The one-man band is my situation, so yes.
Yeah. So OTT gag?
Yep.
Yeah, it's sort of an unfortunate acronym we have.
We're going to gag
I love
you.
your show.
I started using Final Cut Pro 10 on the day it was released, and I did the thing everybody did, is open it up, go, oh my God, and shut it back down again.
Oh God, what is this?
What the hell?
This can be really cool, and I really hate it.
I could go from here to here and be okay, and from here to here and be okay, and then from 7 to Final Cut 10, I'm like, why don't I understand this?
Apple didn't help themselves by saying, we're no longer supporting Final Cut 7. We're doing a hard cut from Final Cut 7 to Final Cut 10, and they probably should have done a dissolve.
I remember it coming out and there being this big kerfuffle. It actually had turned into good press for me because they've done something so huge here that it's pissing a lot of people off, so I'm automatically interested.
Here was a group of people that were willing to take risks on pretty much every level and essentially start over after they had really conquered quite a bit of territory.
I love that they said, let's reinvent. Let's look at where things are going with digital media, and let's reinvent the editing paradigm based on where we think things are going.
And in doing so, clearly they had left certain features behind, and I think that people really focused on that.
People should have been paying attention, but for some reason, a whole lot of people got really emotional and didn't look back, which is a big shame.
I'm sad that people hate Final Cut 10, and I'm sad that the people who love Final Cut 10 feel like they're oppressed. I just want us all to get over it.
I think they found it personally threatening because they didn't actually know what they were. And if you're a storyteller, it doesn't matter what kind of software you use.
The skill of storytelling using video is becoming something that everybody needs to be able to do.
That's what Final Cut 10 makes possible. It's a tool that we can use today to tell the stories that need to be told to enable our society to move forward.
Every human being has got at least one beautiful story in their soul, and it would be nice to give them the strength and the ability to express it. We have that now with Final Cut 10.
Today, you have very little excuse not to make a film if you really want to make a film.
The mechanics of editing have kind of gone away, and it really now comes down to storytelling. Making it easier for somebody to tell a story means that we get to see more of those stories, which I think is really cool.
Off the Tracks is a documentary about Final Cut Pro 10, but I think it tells a larger story, which is about where this industry is headed. And I think Final Cut Pro 10 is symbolic of, or not even symbolic, it actually is something that's sparking that change and redefining what the industry is and what professionals can be in the video production industry. Obviously, if all of you watch this movie, you'll get to see the whole story unfold, and it's told really well. But Brad, there has to have been something about Final Cut 10 that spoke to you, because people aren't making documentaries about other software, right? I haven't seen Premiere Pro, the movie, out there, and I hope we don't. But what is it about Final Cut Pro 10, apart from using it and enjoying it, that really inspired you to make a whole movie about it?
Well, darn, thanks for killing my next project, Premiere Pro, the greatest thing ever. No, honestly, I don't. The reason why I could make a documentary about Final Cut Pro 10 is because it's a case study on change, right? Like, it's how do people react to technological advances that, in my opinion, are for their better, but why do they react negatively to these things? and what kind of people embrace these kinds of changes. So really, it's about a community of people. I look at the documentary as a story about a community of people who took a chance on a new thing that they saw would benefit them creatively, and didn't listen to the naysayers and the negativity, and were able to push forward and be successful using tools that were that just are faster, easier, and more enjoyable to use. So that's really what to me works about it. If you were to tell the story about Avid, you'd have to go back to the 90s and talk about the change from film to digital or computer editing. But of course, that change was still relying on familiar paradigms, and Final Cut 10 sort of threw that all out of the window. They started over, and that disruption is controversial, and that means you've got a good story.
Well, and you mentioned Avid, which is still the kind of reigns supreme in Hollywood and high-end broadcast, and there are a number of larger houses certainly that still use Avid, but I think in the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen an explosion in the number of different types of people outside of the mainstream who are now making video content. Certainly with iPhones and smartphones and people having access to video cameras all around them, but I don't think Apple is focused specifically on Hollywood.
So basically, you're talking about the term, when we look at high-end professionals and who needs access to video, that's evolved, and that means that there's more people. So what's Apple's interest in the high-end professionals? Shouldn't they be targeting a broader market? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well, I think Apple saw that potential and clearly targeted that broader market. For the longest time, Apple has been about giving everybody a certain amount of power to do things with their software and their hardware, their tools. And they, the old expression, skate to where the puck is going to be. Well, the puck isn't going to be Hollywood for most people. It's never been that for most people.
Well, I have some thoughts about what Apple's interest in Hollywood is, because I actually think it would be of interest for them to get Final Cut 10 in the door at Hollywood, only because content creators, people who make video, want something to aspire to. And we always look at Hollywood as this is the highest end, this is the most intense in terms of the amount of footage that they shoot, the amount of work that they have to do, and it's obviously the highest quality product. So if the tool is capable of delivering at that high end, then that for you as an individual content creator, it's fully capable to do anything that you would want it to be able to do. Now, the challenge with that is complexity versus simplicity, right? Like, yes, I want my tool to be able to do everything, but I also want it to be easy to understand. I don't, I'm not going to be able to walk into an airplane and look at the, cockpit with all the controls and be able to figure that out, but I want to get from point A to point B. So what Final Cut does in my mind is it's completely capable of giving you the same end result, and we've seen that proven with Focus and Whiskey Tango Foxtrot and with independent films, that it is fully capable of handling a feature-length doc or feature-length narrative. At the same time, it hasn't been adopted in Hollywood, but I don't think that's the tool's fault. I think that yes, there's some things we could dig into there, but I really think the problem is that Hollywood needs help, that they are, a decade, almost 2 decades behind the technological curve in terms of how they make movies. In terms
of perception.
Yeah, and so people think that Hollywood's, this cutting edge technological thing, and it may be some areas they are, but largely they're so far behind with, they don't all update to the newest version of Avid. They're using Media Composer as old as Media Composer 4. Some high-end TV shows that are on, network channels are editing on Media Composer 4 on 12-year-old systems, if you can believe that. So, the Hollywood needs to adapt, I think, because if the independent producers, if the independent creators are able to push out this essentially from a technical standpoint the same amount of work or quality of work, and they're able to do it faster and cheaper, then that puts pressure on Hollywood to respond to that, and they can't just hire more and more people. So they're going to need to be eventually looking for more creative tools. But of course, in other places in the world, they already are, right? Like, we've definitely seen a lot of case studies coming out of places like Europe. So I don't know. That's a lot of answers to, I think, what you're getting at.
Well, I would argue that I can't say anything for Apple, of course, but I would argue that either on purpose or not, what they are also doing is challenging the definition of the word professional. Not only challenging that definition, but also blurring the lines between what a consumer and a professional is, because really, in the end of the day, as much you would rather have every single video that you produce, be that just for your own consumption or to go out to anyone else, to be high quality, right? So we have high quality cameras that are cheaper. We have high quality software that is not only cheap to maintain. I mean, you purchase once, and so far we've had like 7 years of updates for free. So I think, either on purpose or not, Apple is challenging the status quo of what it means to be a professional. And I think that is one thing that is very important, because it is part of the video literacy. I mean, you can be a professional writer, but everyone in the world, generally speaking, or at least in the developed world, knows how to read and write. And at some point, everyone will know how to film, edit, and export a video or film or something like that. Some will do it really well, some won't. But I think this is one of the things that Apple, again, can't say for them, but I think that's one thing that they want. They want people to know video as much as they know writing.
Well, look at their marketing. Apple is very... in a way, their marketing is somewhat ironic, because Gabriel's talking about how Apple's bread and butter is smartphones and those devices, and the iPhone just makes them hand over fist so much money, and they're the largest company in the world. Now take a look at some of their most recent ads. They're featuring individual creative people. Like, they are focused on people that they're not even ashamed to show that some of these people have older Macs, some of them have newer Macs, but they're doing music, they're doing photography, and it's an individual person. It's an individual who's creating and expressing themselves with Apple technology, and so Apple is somewhat coming in as an underdog. I mean, if you take a look at HP or Microsoft or some of these other companies like Samsung, their marketing is we are the greatest, biggest thing in the world. And Apple is like, we are focused on empowering individuals and making their lives better and allowing them to express themselves. So, and yet they also have the most expensive machines. But I think the marketing feeds into, products like Final Cut Pro 10, where it's, hey, we are empowering people to do everything that they need to do, creatively. And I'm sure that Apple would jump on a story like if Steven Soderbergh, he's using iPhones to make a movie. I'm sure they would love for him to be cutting on Final Cut. So I do think there are some Hollywood types, but they want them to kind of come over onto this side of, I'm a creative individual, not part of the big machine.
The established studio system.
Yeah, the established studio system. So
I think part of the problem we've seen over the last 7 years is because Final Cut Pro 10 is not been embraced by Hollywood. You mentioned, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot and Focus, which are two big movies that were used on it and used very well on it and actually saved them money. It doesn't change the perception of Hollywood so much as just the rest of the world thinks Final Cut 10 isn't professional because they haven't used it in Hollywood, or it hasn't been used all across Hollywood, so therefore it must be software.
Yeah, that's silly.
To that extent, I mean, there's still like a Final Cut Pro 10 the debate forum on the Creative Cow. Like, they're still debating whether it's even a usable tool. It's an odd situation, because clearly there are over 2.5 million seats of Final Cut Pro 10 sold. Certainly, they're not all video professionals, but
I mean,
there are a lot of people using it.
whoever hasn't believed so far, I mean, there is no point in concentrating on those people anymore. I mean, they're gonna come and go. A lot of people are gonna come and go. But I think the interesting thing is where things are going, really. Because, for example, Adobe is concentrating a lot into adding features to their marketing strategy, right? A lot of things are AI powered. And all companies are investing in AI. We know that Apple does that. We know that Google does that. We know that Adobe does that. And I think there are a lot of things that, for example, Adobe keeps on announcing, and eventually, probably Apple will be interested in doing those things. Do you guys have any speculation about what you could see coming, either based on what you've seen Apple add into Final Cut, or something that you think could be in their list of stuff?
I want to back up a little bit because you said something interesting, and I want to kind of bring in. But I had so we debuted Off the Tracks last month, and largely that crowd was the Final Cut. I'd call them the Final Cut Classic crowd, and a lot of people in there. There were people there who were using 10, but a lot of people in there had just stopped paying attention, and it was really interesting. Because the beginning of my documentary focuses on the release and the past, and there's a lot of humor in that section, and I was getting huge laughs, bigger than I expected, which was very rewarding as a filmmaker. But I just kept thinking, they have no idea what's coming. Like, I am setting them up. They're like, yeah, burn, Apple, burn, at the beginning, and then as it evolves and we talk about where Final Cut's going and we talk about video literacy, by the end of the film, I had people coming up to me saying, I hated Final Cut, but I got to take a second look now that I've seen your doc. Like, it's really opened my eyes. And I don't think it's so much that there's pure haters out there. I think there's just a bunch of people just trying to get their job done, and anything that they see is being too complex or too difficult or changing, might take too much time, or there are too many people have to be changed. They're going to make a lot of excuses to not change just to keep working because they just want to work. But once their eyes are opened to this whole idea of you can be empowered, I think the more creative people, the people who focus on storytelling, are actually very open to, once they see the benefit, I think they're very open to that. So, moving into the whole video literacy conversation, or what is Apple doing to empower people? I think they've created a baseline in the software. Like, the ideas with starting over with 10 are a great foundation to build off of, because yes, Premiere can add some auto color tools and whatever, but it's still going to be, the foundation is wrong. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. And Final Cut, is building, to use that metaphor that's usually applied to like a really bad movie that you're trying to fix. But but I think Final Cut, from the beginning had content auto analysis and had with the magnetic timeline and other features that actually, once AI is thrown into the mix and machine learning is thrown into the mix, it'll be a much more efficient program for moving things around, changing things. We've got auditions, we've got, those are all concepts that even if they started rewriting Final Cut, the concepts and that kind of language that we've learned with the editing software, I believe is going to, make it the best positioned software moving into the future. The giant hole, and I think in the next 6 months we'll hopefully see this fixed. But the giant hole for Final Cut is that they haven't focused as much on collaboration, which is a whole can of worms. And I know, Felipe, that's something that you're very passionate about. I believe they are looking into that. I think that we will see something. We have to see something with the next version that shows that, because that's where I see the future of content creation going, is moving into the cloud. And you need to start with local networks and getting it on that level, and then you can move up. Like, I have I have 2 terabytes, I think, on Google Drive now. If with a faster internet connection and 2 terabytes, that's enough to do a proxy workflow on a feature.
Oh, totally.
But I don't have tools with Final Cut that, mesh with that or work with that yet. So I can see that being a necessity, not just for the high end, but for any corporate video production company, any group of YouTubers working together. Because, here we are, 3 different parts of the world. I mean, obviously Gabe and I are closer than you are, but still, and sometimes, Sam's on this show. And it's different parts of the world. You guys are all have similar interests, passions, and you want to work together, and you have to collaborate. And right now, it's like one person kind of has to pick up the edit and all the footage and edit it, and it's not a quick, easy way for all 3 of you to be working in the same project. But that has to change. Perfect example right here. Just saying, perfect example with what you guys are doing. You're not producing, a show that costs $500,000 or $1 million, $500,000 or $1 million an episode, but you're producing quality content. Gabe's pocketing all the money from Patreon or something.
Somebody's got to pay for these gels. No, we talked about how Final Cut and Apple shaped Final Cut to empower the individual. And we've got that. They've done that successfully. But now you have to expand that out, and they have to work to empower teams now, teams of individuals working together, because that would help all 3 of us. And we can share assets, and we can share, to the audience who isn't aware, Final Cut Pro 10 uses a construct called a library, which is just like a large database. And so you can share that and link assets versus just like a regular project file. And you could use it with any software, but there are much more streamlined ways that we could be working together where, for example, say we share our media, I could start the edit and just send it to Felipe, and he could just take over in real time via the cloud. That would be much better than just all sending copies of the exact same media to each other to have on separate local drives, and then opening different versions of the same library. So yeah, Apple has some work to do, and I agree with you, Brad. I think they are working on that behind the scenes. It's the next logical step. Even if I didn't, and it's one of those things where even if Get a Grip wasn't a thing, and I was just doing running my own company where I don't really collaborate with anybody, even if it's a feature I would never use, I still want to see them go that direction because it helps the whole platform evolve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so I guess we all agree that collaboration definitely is a big thing. And of course, I've asked people in the past, what do you think collaboration is? And most of the people, they answer as giving as a workflow as an answer. Oh, no, I want 2 people to be able to open the same timeline at the same time. And we know that actually Apple doesn't work that way. They don't work on how it is that you want to do it. They work on what it is that you want to achieve. And Brad, you showed that quite well on the documentary when they were, for example, showing the I don't remember which feature it was, but it was the guy that was part of the design team, and he was mentioning that people ask for things or maybe it was actually I don't remember who was saying that.
Well, I know one line that is in the documentary comes from Mark, where he says, I think they take people's feedback, but they also think themselves where things are going. So Mark Spencer from Ripple Training mentioned that, and I think that's very true. In my conversations with going to the Creative Summit and stuff, you get the chance to interact with some of the people from the Apple team. And of course, they don't tell you anything, but they listen to you and they ask you questions. And I very much get the sense that they want to know how you're working. You don't just walk up to them and say, you need to add this. You say, I'm trying to do this thing, and I'm trying to achieve it. Would it work to do it this way? And then they might ask you a question, why would you want to do it this way or this way? And they're just trying to figure out what's the fastest way to get you from point A to point B. How many steps can we cut out, and so you can just get to that end result? And a lot of people, I think the difference, but that's how the Apple team works. And if you look at the Adobe team, they are just taking requests. Can you just, for example, we've got 2 ways in Premiere to collaborate. We've got this project sharing thing and this team projects thing, and it's very confusing as to which one do I use and what circumstances, because they did the one, but then their one or two Hollywood editors said, well, that's not how my assistants are trained. You have to do it the way Avid does it. So then they did essentially bin locking, maybe with their own little take on it, but it was essentially the same idea, so that Hollywood editors could collaborate the same way with Premiere as they do with Avid. And I think what ends up happening is you have a very confused application when you just take everybody's feedback and try to, put it in and have like 5 or 6 ways to do the exact same thing. Of course, software ends up sort of working that way, where you discover a way to do it and there's maybe another legitimate way to do it. But I think as much as possible, the Apple people are thinking, let's just streamline this and make it as obvious and simple as possible. And that's actually harder to do. It's much harder to take a whole bunch of ideas of how you might achieve something and try to boil it down to what's the quickest, fastest, easiest way. You're going to spend a lot more time developing that, which is probably why we haven't seen just bin locking in Final Cut, or 2 people working in the same timeline at the same time, which is, I agree, I don't think that's how it would be implemented, but I think that in my vision of collaboration with Final Cut, you would be able to share events with me, maybe via Apple ID or something, and then I would be able to look in those and I would be able to copy them into my events, into my library, and then I can keep working, and then I can just pass it back to you, and it's like AirDrop, where it's like, hey, Bradley wants to share this thing for you. Do you want to bring it into this library? And you could say yep, or you can say nope, I don't care what Brad's done, I'm doing my own thing. So it empowers the individual, but it also makes it possible for people to share things in real time, and it gives you that advantage of being able to just keep working. And I can share something with you, and I don't necessarily have to like say, hey, did you get my email? Did you download the thing? You can see it right then. So those are important things to figure out, and they're hard.
Yeah, and you have to keep in mind too that all of these things have many pieces to the puzzle, right? Because it's not just Final Cut, and Final Cut is just one of the teams inside Apple. If they're gonna do anything, they're gonna depend on a whole network of features or things around. Like, let me clarify what I'm saying. If collaboration will work, like you said, they can start just with a network, but there isn't a huge difference between a local network and the internet. So in my mind, for example, whatever they're doing, they're already thinking about the internet. Network speeds and internet speeds, they are increasing. Proxy workflows, they're becoming definitely a possibility with the cloud. So I think they would do at least connected to the internet somehow. Step number 2 is that internet service would be iCloud. There is no questions about that. So right then, they are depending on the iCloud team to probably change the back end to enable features that they want, enable APIs that they are going to need. That also means maybe upgrading the infrastructure for iCloud, and it's something that's not very simple when there are millions of people depending and using iCloud every single day. iCloud is there for iMessage, is there for iTunes, is there for movies, is there for basically everything that our Apple devices connect to, including Siri. So it's not so simple. And then step number 3 is they're going to definitely need to change their storage tiers, because 5 gigabytes for free, and then you skip to 50 or 200. I mean, they're good sizes for a normal person, but probably nowadays it would be good for the tier, for the free tier to have maybe 15 gigabytes like Google Drive offers. And then the next one that is 99 cents could be the 200 gigabytes. And then $3 a month, which is today 200 gigabytes, could be 1 terabyte. And then suddenly that becomes something that you can really think about putting your stuff up there. So there are so many pieces, and this is just the beginning, just the network part of it. And then if you think about everything else that goes around, they might already have the solution ready, but they're waiting for other parts of the the microphone. So they might have the solution ready, but they are waiting for other parts of the puzzle to get resolved and be available as well. I don't know. In collaboration, I think it's not so simple, and I'm very certain. I have no information whatsoever from them, but I'm very certain that they're working on that. There is no way.
Right, and I don't know. I agree that they have to be thinking about building it towards the internet in mind. I would think they need to have something soon, so I think it might be rolled out in stages as they build it, and build it to something that's totally functional on the iCloud, because that's where it needs to go. I would, it's Apple, so they probably want to control it, and they would want, just like you don't have Final Cut on Windows, you probably may not have Final Cut collaboration on Google Drive, but it'd be kind of cool if it was opened up to other service providers.
There's a simple thing that iCloud absolutely needs to change in order to make this become reality. Today, iCloud saves directly to your internal drive, and you have no chance to change that to an external drive. While we don't have that setting, we can't use iCloud for that thing. Otherwise, you're going to be on a computer with low storage, and you're not going to be able to work because your iCloud media needs to download to your computer. Now, once iCloud, maybe it's going to be called iCloud Pro. Maybe it's the iCloud for professionals, that one in which you can go there in the settings and say, the cache for iCloud Pro lives in this drive, for example. And maybe that could be one thing but they have to change that. You can't be downloading the stuff to your internal drive, even if it's proxy.
Yeah.
Okay, that was one feature then. What other things you guys think should be coming?
Why don't they have an audio mixer? That's just so silly. And it doesn't have to be just like every audio mixer, but why don't they have a way for me to if right now if I want to mix audio, I have to create a compound clip.
And what's the big problem with that? I mean, I do that every day. I don't see the problem with that.
Have you done it on a feature?
Yeah.
It's not fun.
Even on a short form project that's still going somewhere else. If you can do it right within, what I don't like about the compound clip method, and so we've got audio roles, and so you can assign metadata to all of your audio. I almost said tracks to all of your audio components. So you could have sound effects or Bradley, Gabriel, Felipe, and then using this thing called the timeline index, you can sort your audio and reorganize it and work with it much easier. And the roles part is like 90% there, I think. But in order to mix all of those together, you've got to create a compound clip. And then from within that compound clip, you're outside the project, and you basically got one long clip that exposes all those roles. But I have the same problem with that as I have with pre-comps in After Effects, where you can take a bunch of layers and group them all in a pre-comp. But when you're working on that pre-comp, it's all outside the context of the original project.
Yep.
So why can't we mix them within the context of the thing? And this is not my idea. This is a roles-based mixer, right? I mean, you can almost do it right in the timeline index because the timeline index shows every role, and even just a single slider right within there or something. I mean, it wouldn't take much because everything's being routed through there anyway. Why do we have to step outside of it into a compound clip?
In my case, I only do the audio once I log the video for that version. So for example, I'm working on version 14 of this video that's behind me here, and you can see that the timeline here is open, but this is inside the compound clip. What I normally do is I have the music here, the music track. The music track doesn't have any keyframes or anything like that, and is in 0 dB. So what I do is I just deactivate that role. I don't hear the music through the thing. I work with all my videos. When I finish, I create a compound clip, reactivate the music, and then I start mixing. I have my sound effects there as well. I have my dialogues, and I don't know, at least for the type of work that I do, it doesn't seem that complicated. When it's more complicated, or if it's a bigger one, I was looking into Logic, and into Logic, it comes grouped by roles. So for example, if I have a role for dialogue, one for sound effects, and one for music, when you import it into Logic, you see those 3 groups there, and then once you expand the groups, you see like if it would be a bunch of tracks for each one of them, and if you named them, they all have names there. And you're able to do that workflow from Final Cut to Logic and back to Final Cut. quite easily. Actually, it's through XML, and you don't need any external apps. So
you want me to make the case?
No,
I agree.
no,
I agree with you.
I know. I agree. I agree that it would be great to have everything in one application. For example, DaVinci added Fusion into DaVinci. They have Fairlight into DaVinci. But I also would say it's not necessarily a priority.
Well, I would have rather seen. It's not great from a marketing standpoint. But I would have rather seen them finish out, because it's in the patent, right? Like the patent for rules and rules-based mixer, if you look at it, it actually has channels and volume and a channel strip and everything. So it is where they were going. They got cut short. My understanding is because of the touch bar. Like it got thrown at them, hey, we want you to demo the touch bar, so forget what you're working on. Add some touch bar functionality, and then the next year it's like, we need something new to headline, so we're going to do color tools. To me, the color tools, because we already had third-party solutions, the built-in color tools were less important to me than finishing that thought. But I understand from a marketing standpoint why, and kind of like you said, with sending audio out to Logic, you can also send your picture out to Resolve, and that's what I like to like. I mean, that's what I would do if I was really finishing at a high level. So when it comes to audio, though, there's a couple reasons why. One, I think that clients are, it used to be that clients had to pay a lot more money, and they understood that the process for making a video took a lot longer. And I feel like now clients and producers understand that less and less, because we are able to do more and more. And so, it's like if you're sending out a feature for a test audience, or you're sending something out for client approval, you want to be able to quickly mix that and clean that up so that they're not giving you notes on stuff that doesn't matter, that they're distracted by. And I'm actually just going through this on a TV movie with a network that broadcasts all over the world that should know this process, but they don't. And so they're giving me stupid notes on temp music. They're giving me stupid notes on audio. Can you fade this background sound out slower? Was a note that I literally got. And I don't want to stop what I'm doing, create a compound clip and mix something. But I could be working more towards the finish if I didn't have to step out of context in terms of the edit. Does that make sense? Like, because to go through, I have to go to that next step, but I would rather be just working and, this is a problem, I'll just set a limiter on it real quick or whatever, but I don't want to do that work and lose that work. And right now, it's like, if I want to go back and make edit changes and whatever, I can't hear it in context of the mix because it's in a compound clip. The other problem is compound clips, the bigger they get, like it's fine for a 2-minute video or 5-minute video, but you get a compound clip that's a 20-minute video and it's got stuff that's composited in it, or it's got graphics in it, and it'll just grind your machine to a halt, which is a limitation of compound clips. One quick solution, which I think would be beneficial for everything when it comes to compound clips, is
open in timeline.
Open it in a timeline without having to jump to another timeline. If I could just expand those components, do my little edits, just like we do with audio components. That's how compound clips, in my opinion, should work.
Well, just like you do also with, you do that also with secondary timeline. You can do that. You can do that also with, God, seriously, that I can't remember right now. The animation is there. You can do precision editor. You can do precision editor, and it expands, and you have the context of the clip before and the clip after, and you can actually play back the whole thing if you want that way. But
yeah, I mean, literally all they have to do is give us a visual indicator, just like a color boundary around the contents of the compound clip. Anything that was, so if you've got a timeline if you have a timeline that includes a compound clip, any clips above it or on the sides of it would continue to be above it, and on the sides they would just get pushed up while you're inside it, close it back down, back to work.
No, I totally agree with that. No, I totally agree with Brad as well about being able to mix within the context. I mean, the only thing that I was saying is like, it's not that is stopping you from doing the work.
No, it's not stopping you from finishing the work. It's just that you've got to set, like you said, you have to lock your edit. And how often, like, my locked edit is, well, even for this movie last week, I just changed a couple things before uploading it to Amazon and VHX.TV. So locking the edit is like something that it's just happens when it's sent away and I can no longer touch it. And so for me to fix some of those things, it's like, okay, I've got to run my export, and then I've got to, what I actually do, because compound clips are such a problem for the documentary, I sent AAFs to my sound mixer. I actually split the movie up into 3 acts, and I know some people are like, just work on one timeline, but it just seems like if you can limit your timelines to 40 minutes and under, it just Final Cut behaves better. So I got these logical just 3-act splits in this case, or sometimes I do reels, and people say that's old-fashioned, but honestly, if I can get better performance with that, I'm going to do it. So I've sent that off to my sound mixer, and then I'll export my whole timeline, and then I'll basically have a baked in an export with a multi-track with the rolls, rather than a compound clip, because now it's all, the video's all baked down. And then I'll add the stems on top of that. And then, for example, if I got a new music cue or something, which happened, that my audio mixer didn't have, or I want to cut out a section or whatever, then I can do that myself and use his stems, and then I recreated the master based off of that. But those are all extra steps. I would rather just drop the stems into my timeline with my edits, and then keep working, and then be able to mute certain rolls, and then use his stems for some things and use mine and edit that way, and then export everything once, as opposed to this kind of 2-step to get to my master, which has just been the fastest way to work, because compound clips just break.
Do you know what I would like to see that is metadata related and audition related? It would be to, like, for example, if you tag something as angle A, take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that you would be able to select all of them and drag into the timeline, and they become an audition, and then you can just go through the takes in the timeline, for example. Probably not going to be useful for a lot of people, because the workflow, it's supposed to be in the browser first, to choose in the browser which one is the first take. But sometimes going in the context of having the timeline playing back, and you just do a shortcut and changes to the other take, can be helpful. And if that would be available, it could be also an upgrade to compound clips as well, in a way.
Well, what you just described, I think, is absolutely necessary when we get to the whole machine learning AI type of editing, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's done a pre-cut for me, and I'm like, no, I don't like that close-up of this person. Can you change it this angle, or can you switch to that take at this part? Like, I literally feel like maybe it will be voice-driven, maybe it'll be keyboard-driven, I don't know, or touchscreen-driven, but I feel like it'll pre-comp some sort of edit, and then you're just going to go through and you're going to swap angles and takes, and everything, kind of like everything's a giant multicam or something, but it's pre-cut and preconceived, and then you're going to make your changes based off of how you want to tell the story. Oh, let's just cut out these lines, boom. I think the timeline has to get smarter, and of course computers will need to get a lot faster for that to be kind of this real-time feedback, but yeah, I agree.
Well, and that would only work for very specific types of stories. I mean, they would have to be told in a linear fashion, because how would Final Cut
or any time you have a script, it would work really well.
A script that could be plugged in, because you could use the metadata from the script to inform corresponding metadata on all the captured clips, and it could marry that together, and then the structure would be clear from a data standpoint.
But then you also have tools like what Philip Hodgetts is developing, right, where you're using transcripts and you're building your edit, and so then at that point it could feed into the system we're talking about. So at some point you have some form of a script that gets, whether that's automated transcripts that you then go through and edit and then tell the machine what you want, or
Well-
it's already a narrative scripted thing that you're moving over.
I think that Siri will come into Final Cut in the form of right-click, and then you have transcode proxy, transcode optimized media. You're gonna have transcribe.
Yeah.
And the thing's gonna go through the thing, and you're gonna have transcripts right there. And you know what? It's gonna be for free. If
Yeah.
that will ever come to Final Cut, it will be for free. Suddenly you're gonna have transcripts right into Final Cut, and you didn't need to go to any service. Of course, it's gonna break some other people's services that they have out there, but if for me that would be a big game changer, to be honest. If I could do that.
Yeah, as long as you want your characters, when they swear, to constantly be saying ducking. Siri's really good at that. She's got a ways to go before
auto-duck foul words.
Yeah, Siri, as of today, I think is pretty stupid, but the voice assistant person of the future, the auto-transcribing stuff of the future, I think will be...
I mean, transcription-wise, it's pretty good. We can see that with dictation. Responding to requests is pretty stupid, like you're saying, but the intelligence, the analysis behind it, it's all there already. They just haven't enabled. So I think, for example, adding transcription, it is, in a way, as simple as collaboration. I mean, it's going to depend on other teams and APIs and things like that, but why not?
There's some types of technology and AI that can take care of menial tasks. Like any one of us can visibly and manually sync multicam clips, but why bother if it can just read the waveforms and do it, or bring in an audio timecode? But at what point is this eliminating menial tasks and, on the flip side, making our jobs irrelevant?
Well, that's where, again, it comes back to storytelling, and I think that you will see a whole slew of YouTube videos and corporate videos and other stuff where they just think, this is good enough, but it'll be missing that creative, because I don't think a computer, I don't know how you would program a computer to make the random connections, this piece of music or these two shots juxtaposed evoke some emotion out of me. How does a machine learn that? I mean, I think it could synthesize it, but the truly creative stuff, I think, comes down to the person. And so I think it could give you a baseline, but if you want to create stories that really touch people, I think that's still a human thing. I don't know how you teach that.
I think in terms of AI and machine learning, the things that are very logical to come are object tracking, face tracking. So, for example, if you say apply a face mask here, and then you can do vignettes on that face and apply specific things to the face. I mean, we know that it has face detection already inside Final Cut, but it doesn't apply to masks and things like that. Machine learning, tracking objects, for example, right? You can track a logo or something like that. I think those things are definitely coming, and they are all going to be part of machine learning and AI.
Well, I think Resolve already has the face tracking masks.
Yeah.
So the technology isn't new. It just, will Apple adopt it, or when will they will?
I think it's more about the when. They are hiring engineers, so they are looking for people there to join their team.
When Final Cut was announced in 2011, they said that they had a 10-year roadmap, and we're beyond the 7th anniversary now. So if they indeed end Final Cut Pro 10 on the 10 years, what's next? Do you think they're going to go back to tracks? I don't.
Well, when there is this thing about roadmap, I in my head is like, today's 2011. No matter what happens to this software right now, we have a roadmap of 10 years. Now, the software has been very successful, I would say, so far. So just because they said that in the very first year, I wouldn't say that would be the case still. The roadmap is like OS 10. OS 10 is going to go until what? 10.15, 16, 17, 18. When is going to be OS 11? And I think the number itself is just a marketing thing. They just like the X. They just like the 10, the numeral.
Right. Well, and I also throw this in there, which is, when they said that, I don't think they were anticipating the backlash So it took them a few years to really get it stable and get their feet on the ground, and not the software stability, but just the perception. And we're still seeing, I mean, we wouldn't be talking about this if there were still not ridiculous negative perceptions that need to be overcome. So in my mind, I don't know when Final Cut 10 will be end of life, but I do think that it'll go beyond the 2021 mark before they end up saying, okay, we're replacing it with something. And I hope that whatever they replace it with is building off of the ideas that started with 10. And of course, they're also way ahead of the competition, right? Because Project Rush was just announced, they're just barely going to release it, and it's going to take 2 or 3 years before Adobe builds that product up to a point where I think it will replace Premiere. It means that Apple's can kind of be comfortable with Final Cut, because there's so many people out there that don't understand what Final Cut is or the potential of it is. Even people who use Final Cut Pro 10 on a regular basis haven't tapped into the power or understanding of it. I've talked to people who were like, yeah, I don't like how you sync audio using compound clips in Final Cut. And I'm like, well, why are you using compound clips? Why are you not using synchronized clips and multicam clips? And this is something, actually just talking to Sam Messman the other day. He's been in Chicago working with students, and he said that was a thing that came up. And what he's realized, this was actually a really funny conversation we had, because he's like, Brad, I've realized that where I've been at in the last 7 years is like a completely different place than the rest of the world, and that nobody in the rest of the world actually understands what Final Cut 10 does, why it's better. Even people who use it just don't fully understand it and grasp it. When you look at the amount of people who've, have something like Color Finale or X to Pro, I think those are good indicators of the people who are really pushing Final Cut 10 beyond what it's capable of. And I don't have exact numbers on that, but I think that you're actually looking at around 20,000 people who are really, really understanding Final Cut Pro 10. And even within that group, I think there's people that want to force Final Cut 10 to work like Final Cut 7. And when I see those people, I'm like, no, you don't get it. You're like, your eyes have not been opened. You like get it enough to make it work for your job, but you don't like see the vision. So that's why I was trying to get across in my documentary. When I show, at the end of the film, we show Sadie using switch control with Final Cut. It shows the potential like that of this program just empowering everybody to do amazing work and and express themselves creatively. And when you do things like, oh, I have to use an EDL, or I have to make an OMF, or oh, I have to, why doesn't it have tracks? I'm going to try to force it to work like tracks, and I'm going to use the position tool. Or I don't know, like this. I'm sure you guys have come up on internet forums, the silly things people do to try to like force Final Cut 10 to work in an inefficient way because it's the way that they know other NLEs work. And when I see that, I see the potential once people, and it's probably just going to be a new generation growing up with iMovie, coming into Final Cut and not having any clue as to how Avid was supposed to work and how Premiere worked and how Final Cut Classic worked, and they're just embracing it for what it is and just and going along that line. Those are the people that are going to open up the potential, and that's just starting. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at in this long rant.
Well, and that aha moment, that feeling of, well, you guys just don't get it, it hasn't clicked with you. It's hard to say that without sounding condescending.
Yes.
And we don't mean it that way. It's not like, we're not saying you're an idiot. We're not saying the way you are currently editing in whatever software is wrong or bad. If you're getting the work done and you enjoy it, more power to you. But there is...
like creating string outs is a good indicator, right? If they're creating string outs and you're like, oh.
I just want to step back on one thing. You said the project, what was the name of the project there?
Rush.
Project Rush, Adobe's
From
software.
Adobe, right? To rewrite their applications, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify, because maybe not a lot of people have heard or have read about it, that Adobe is rewriting their applications.
Finally.
So
No, it's about time. I'm very excited about it.
They're rewriting the code to allow for even more panels.
Well, Project Rush is very simple right now. It doesn't. It's like it's like iMovie on your iPhone where you just bring in whatever clips and it just adds it to a timeline. There's no like project browser. There's no keywording or that kind of organization yet, but it does have connected clips and it does behave like the magnetic timeline. At the same time, it has tracks and you can kind of turn them on or off. Like you can actually turn that off.
Come on,
So
even the color scheme is so similar to another application.
Yeah, it's it's no doubt that they're inspired by something that we've seen before. But I'm glad because to me it legitimizes that Apple was right in 2011. That they saw
they
the
are
future.
recognizing.
They recognized the future. They embraced it. It maybe was too early. The other crazy thing about Apple jumping ahead like that, and that kind of self-cannibalization type of thing that they do over and over again, is Avid should be dead by now. If you look at all their financials, where they were going, Avid was on. I think they were on their. They were dead essentially by 2011, and that when Final Cut came out in 1999, the reason why it got such a boost is because Avid said they were abandoning the Mac platform, and there were a whole bunch of editors who loved their Macs and needed to look for an alternative, and here it was with Final Cut Pro. The irony is that in 2011, Apple sort of returned that gift to Avid because they said, hey, here's this new thing that nobody understands yet, and we're starting over, and we could have released Final Cut Pro 8, and that would have been it for Avid, but we released Final Cut Pro 10 instead, and now a whole bunch of people we can trust Avid, and we're going to, in that high end. Of course, I think more people went to Premiere, and so they gave that gift to the kind of them. But those people are just seeking refuge. Now we're coming to a point where Adobe has recognized the need to start over, and I think Avid's just been limping along, and they've been slowly dying. I don't really see a huge future for them. And yes, I know that they just updated their software, and I know that they added the ability to edit, live while the playback is going, which we've been having in Final Cut for how long? It's not enough, and they've wanted to just they're in a position where they can't change. Now Adobe's doing it in an intelligent way, right? Because they're releasing this thing called Project Rush, and it's for YouTubers, and it's for people who need to get their videos done quickly. But don't worry, Premiere's for the pros, and it's still here. And I find it so funny that online you see these discussions. There should be articles where people are like, Premiere's dead. Like, Premiere is no longer going to be with us. But Adobe's careful with their marketing, and they've convinced people that that's not the case, even though that's exactly what's happening.
Learned by example.
But yeah, they learned from Apple's mistakes, and they're marketing in a rollout way where by the time Project Rush is up to speed, they will accept that they need to hop over because they'll see the benefits, rather than just basically saying, okay, we end of life to this product and jump over to the new thing, which is what Apple did, and which is why it was so controversial. But I'm glad Apple did it because I got to make a documentary about it. So it benefited me. But no, Adobe definitely learned. But I don't understand why people can't see the writing on the wall. Have you guys come across anybody who's panicking that's using Premiere? That's like, oh no, Project Rush, it's going to destroy my job, and like freaking out about it like they did with Final Cut 10. They should be if they were smart.
They don't read the news.
No, I think they kind of have their heads in the sand. They're just, this is what everybody's using. They're convinced that everybody's using Adobe, and that's the only way. And if you're a professional, you're using Adobe, and that's it. But in the last year in particular, most of the Adobe stuff I've run across, and again, I'm not hanging around Adobe forums at this point, but it's mostly people complaining about bugs and performance issues. The fanboyism has diminished quite a bit, and it's a lot of people bitching and moaning about. And
a lot of open
so.
letters.
Yeah, they're not happy with Adobe overall.
Well,
more than I saw in the past, anyway.
The subscription model from the beginning has been controversial for Adobe as well. I think.
I loved the idea at first, but now I look back and it's like I look at what I paid for Final Cut Pro 10, Compressor, Motion, and Logic in 2011, and I look at the $52.79 I've spent every month in that last 7 years from Adobe, and it's just like I paid like 7 times the amount.
Wait, so why
for
are you
Adobe.
paying? What are you paying Adobe for right now?
Well,
I'm just curious. What do you need that you can't replace?
I know what you're saying, and I've tried for years. I have Affinity Design and Affinity Photo to replace Photoshop and Illustrator, but I have to return Photoshop documents and Illustrator documents. I have to return After Effects files. Like these are the actual formats I have to deliver to some of my clients. And if the client, if they were like really poorly paying clients, I'd say forget it, I'm done, I'm moving, I'm dropping Adobe. But I just can't afford to lose that revenue stream, so After Effects it is, Photoshop it
Quick
is.
question. Why do they want the project files?
Because it's through our marketing company, and through them, they do like a lot of big car companies. So I do my work for them, and that way, later on, if they need to make some changes, they don't need to pay me, they can just do their thing.
Yeah.
And I don't complain because they pay
They're
well,
paying enough.
and they've been good to me over the years, so it's like, I'll do my part, whatever you need, that's fine.
That's another interesting question because, I remember a couple of years ago, and I think this ties into the whole people not seeing the writing on the wall or people not seeing the future, is I remember somebody freaking out about, if a client wants my project or whatever, then they have to pay extra for that, which to me is just negotiate that and make it clear up front so it's not awkward on the back end. But if a edit session has deteriorated to the point where I hate the client and they hate me, I'd rather just not work with them again and give them everything and just move on with my life. But the thing that cracked me up is somebody in this back and forth had said, my project timeline is my intellectual property. Like, in other words, the way that I organize and edit on the timeline is my intellectual property. And I thought that was the stupidest thing. With all the free YouTube videos, with all the information out there for people to teach themselves, like that is the anti-video literacy thing to say, I have to protect the way I do stuff.
Well, devil's advocate. I mean, I have a composer who, he's not going to share what he does in Logic Pro with the client. So they can extrapolate pieces of it that they want, and so they can just go on and use his, they'll get the final song, and that's all they get. If my clients so far, if they've asked me for the project, I don't think anybody really has, I would just give it to them, whatever. But I do understand wanting to kind of protect that because it is, I don't know, it's kind of like they're asking for an awful lot more than just a finished video if they ask for that.
I don't get asked for that often, but I just feel like where I see things moving, where people are going to be more educated and we're going to be collaborating more, I would want clients and producers and people who kind of get the process a little bit more. And I would love for them to like have Final Cut and be able to plop their to-do markers in a project and send it back to me and I can do some changes or give me examples.
Frame.io, yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I know there's Frame.io now, but imagine not even having a third party to run through. Imagine just being able to work. And so to me, it's about your relationships and the specific project. And to just, I don't know, I don't like when people guard secrets. I don't like when people say, I'm not going to share knowledge. I'm not going to share how a camera works. We're going to call a tripod sticks because that's going to keep that guy from learning and coming up and learning and taking my job.
I have never been asked for a project file, but I think the reason for that is because of the way I deal with the client. I made it very clear that our exchange is for, I'm providing them a service. I'm not providing them the workflow to get the service done. So in my contract, I actually have there very, very clear what it is that I'm delivering to them. And it's always, it's production for this amount of days with this amount of people, period. Or it is the post-production for video with this title. That's it. I'm going to deliver you a video. And then in one of my fields, it says, what am I delivering in which format? And I'm delivering a video file in this format through this service. Me personally, I have never been asked for project files. Even in the past 10 years, I have never been. So But if I would be asked for a project file, I definitely, it's in my contract that it's an extra, and it doesn't have a price in the contract. And I don't know. It's like it's not that like I'm stopping people from learning, and people that know me, they know that that's not the case. 'Cause I do trainings and I put content out on YouTube teaching people how to do stuff.
Well, there's money in it though.
Yes,
Like,
but it's like you said about your friend musician. Wow, whoever wants to learn music, they can. Nothing stops anyone from learning music and learning any of these things that we do. Our clients, they can learn if they want, but in the end of the day, you want the result. You want something, and getting the recipe for that is not gonna really help. I think if you were in the position of wanting that project, I don't know. It's for me, it is strange when people ask for project files. I mean, in Gabe's case, that he's working with an agency, and they have other professionals like Gabe, and one day maybe it's a Sunday evening, and they need to make a change, and they don't want to go to Gabe, or Gabe is on vacation or something like that. There are a lot of reasons for them to have the project files. But for a client, if it would be the car company, for me, I don't see why they would need that. Because they are going to open the project and they're going to say, oh, I don't understand how you did it. Can you walk me through how you organize this so I can find what I need to change?
Well,
like
it's
layers on After Effects.
There's money involved though too. Like I produced a video in 2015, and in 2 weeks my clients have me go back to that company to reshoot a bunch of stuff because that company got bought out by another company from Japan, and we need to take instead of redoing the whole video, which I'd prefer because that's like. It's done. That's thing was its thing, but whatever. So we're taking this original video, I'm changing the branding and replacing a handful of scenes. If I just gave him that Final Cut 10 library in 2015, let's just say he's not just going to go in there and do his best to swap out some shots and be done with it. I never get the call. I don't get paid to reshoot or re-edit. So no, to me there's no benefit just giving him my project file in that case because I lose out on any future income from that job.
Well, I think the specific situation, and again, it is situational, but the specific situation is, say you have shot something for a client, and again, I think you should make terms clear up front. And one of the things they want is they want original footage, or they want a project file and the original thing. Well, just make that part of the deal up front. But I would not say no, they can't ever have it if they're willing to pay for it. And the fear is people are like, well, they're going to take my video, and they're not professional, so they're going to screw the whole thing up. But I feel like if they don't trust me to do it in the first place, or they don't trust me with the end result, I don't want to work with them again. So I'm more than happy to cut ties, give them all the crap that they want, and just and hopefully you was smart enough to say, yeah, well, this is how much extra it is for those things and not just the finished video, and move on with my life. I guess for me, and this goes back to the AI conversation of like, computers doing more and more and everything. I'm not very interested in your standard kind of corporate-y commercials and videos. I want to work on projects that are creative and I get something out of them, and I'm proud to I've worked on enough stuff that I would never put on a reel that I never want to do that again. And a lot of those situations, the ugly situations that we're talking about, where you get that awkward call of, can you just send us the footage? It's like, I don't want to work with any of those people ever again anyway. And a lot of the people I do like to work with, it would be very weird for them to ask for a project file because they trust me and they want me to do it. In fact, I have a harder time convincing some producers and stuff that they can do a few things on their own. They're like, no, you're so much better than me. You can do this. And I'm like, I sometimes I don't have the time. And I'm like, actually, you're a little rough cut of that. In fact, I'm dealing with the producer right now that he put together these great little rough cuts of these videos. He just took stock footage and voiceover, and he's like, what would you do with this? And he's a filmmaker. He's someone who's written and directed and produced films for the last 20, 30 years. But he knows that I'm a better editor than he is. But for these particular videos, I'm like, I don't know what notes to give you. I think you got exactly what you wanted. So I don't know I don't have the time, A, but B, I think pocket the extra money. So for me, it's about, I'm more interested in relationships than I am in about just money. Does that make sense? Because I think I can make more money from people who respect me, and I'm not going to go chase the ugly situations anymore. But maybe everybody has to go through those. And the idea that a timeline is somehow proprietary knowledge seems kind of weird to me when you can go hop on YouTube and figure out any of that stuff. That's not what I'm protecting. What I'm trying to protect is my value and my creative ideas, and a software program or raw materials are not those things.
No, and I hear you, but it's just, like in my case, if I had given him that project file, even if he valued my ideas, they wouldn't matter because he could just make those changes himself. He wouldn't call me back to make those decisions. So that's kind of where I see that.
You got to make
philosophically, I agree with you, but on the other side, yeah, I've got bills to pay for.
But don't you see it changing more and more? If more people are going to learn video, don't you see clients wanting to hop in more? And granted, there's a lot of people who think they know more than they do, and they screw things up and whatever. But don't you see the next generation having to be more collaborative?
I can give one example. We have that say, you pay what you got, you get what you paid for.
Yep.
And there is another say that is, you think it's expensive to work with a professional, wait until you work with an amateur. So basically, I think that's what it applies. For example, you get an amateur, for example. They're going to do something and they're going to deliver to the client. The client is not going to be happy. They're going to drop that person. They're going to hire a professional and say, can you fix this?
Yep.
And I think that's the same case with the client that has the project files. They're going to try to do it themselves. They're not professionals. That's not what they're doing every day. And then they're going to say, it doesn't look the way I want. And then they're going to get to you and say, can you fix this thing that I just tried to do here? That's why I don't see the benefit on the project file to the client.
That's today, right? That's today, because in the future, with machine learning and AI, where it's able to maybe get some of those technical things out of the way and just get you straight to the idea, they might be able to get a little further in the future before they need.
Not only that, but so will the software, as we talked about. If the software is already assembling these basic cuts, then we are pushing to the point where, as you just said, and as Felipe and I and Sam have talked about in previous episodes, like there's corporate video, standard interview, B-roll, call to action done. And then there's achieving that goal with a dramatic story, which is what we all want to do.
Yep.
That's going to force us to do that because that's what we're getting paid for.
And that's why I like it.
The machine learning and the client can just do the nuts and bolts already. So what makes us special? Which is good because it means we can't just rest on our laurels and be lazy about this. It's not enough to just know how to click the buttons and be fast. You need to know how to play emotion like a pianist plays the piano.
Yeah, we have to step up. I guess that is exactly what I'm getting at. Is there are a slew of videos, and trust me, I've made more than my share of videos I would never want to make again, that I would be more than happy for a client to be able to make themselves. There's no pride in it for me. It's like the end result, this is what they wanted. They were paying for it. They got what they wanted. I'm not proud of the result. I would never stick it on a reel. I would never show you guys these videos that I worked on. And I'm more than happy to let that work go if AI and machine learning and and video literacy can replace that. And I want to just push myself further into doing exactly what Gabe said. Because I don't think we're there today. And I don't think that clients can handle this stuff themselves today. But I can see it moving in that direction. And that forces us to up our game.
Do you know another thing that they can't handle? Real quick, just one thing. Can you send me the original footage? And then you send that ProRes video, and then they try to open that ProRes video on their crappy little Windows machine and say, but the video doesn't open.
And Brad, I was with you completely, but then I realized how hard it's been over the years just to get people to send you like their company logo in the right format. I just want I need a vector file or a PNG. Well, what is that? A portable
and
network
they're like,
graphic.
it's on my website. It's on my website. You know what I've done in the past? I have to recreate some people's logos. I've gotten pretty good at that. Because they're like, I don't know where the file is, the guy who sent it, or I had it made here, and they just don't know. No, it's true. There will always be a need for that kind of stuff.
Well, it just with that in mind, that's what makes me think the video thing is going to be a little while coming. And this doesn't mean I think any of my clients are stupid. It just means they are studying what their business does, and that's an area where I'm an idiot. So it's going to, I would learn about these car companies faster than they learn.
But we have
how
seen that we're kind of we are in a way in the middle of this evolution, right? If you go back 10, 15 years, if you go back 10, 15 years, it would cost a lot more, and there was a lot more people involved in video production. You want to shoot on 16 millimeter film. You have to send it to this lab. You have to use this. This room costs $1,000 an hour, and you have to mix it here. And so now we're looking at the three of us I'm assuming you guys have been in situations where you've one-man banded or just had you and an assistant go on a shoot, right? And you produced...
The one-man band is my situation.
So. Right. Yeah. So we are in this is a huge change. There are no longer as many button pushers involved. And as we continue down this inevitable path, it means that the one-man band person, it will come down to your creative ideas, which I think is the definition of professional anyway. When you talk about amateur and professional, people say, well, professional is someone who gets paid. I'd go a step beyond that and say professional is a person who has a certain attitude about what they're doing. It's not a snobby attitude. It's a collaborative, open community. They're communicating an idea, and they prove their worth by basically saying, like, look at these creative ideas I brought to the table, and that's the person that's going to matter, not the person who... And that goes back to my whole, why is a timeline not proprietary knowledge to me? Because that's a mechanical expression of those things. That's not the actual creative intent. You can't look at somebody's timeline and really understand what went into the idea of why did they pick this shot, why did they cut here. You can see that they did it, but you can't really extrapolate that. So that's, again, to me it's about what you value and what worth you bring to the client should be about your ideas. And the more I can get the other crap out of the way and not have to deal with it, the happier I am. And of course now with this documentary, I'm at a point where everyone's like, what are you doing next? And now I have to look at my career and say, I need to make another movie, and I need to make money at that. And quickly even abandoning the whole model of working for people entirely and just working for myself, which is a weird feeling. Can I do that? I have no idea as I step off of this to the next level.
When you find out, give me a call.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I am. I mean, the movie goes on sale tomorrow. We'll see how many dozens of dollars I can make off of it. And then we'll see if that opens up some doors for the next project. And if I'm at that point, then I will be very happy to say, hey, sorry, I know you like my work, but I am too busy doing what I want to do to work on something I don't want to do.
Okay, I think we had a very interesting conversation, and it was a long one.
Yeah, I think it was a really nice jumping off point from our last episode, which is talking about where the industry was 20, 30 years ago to the present, and now we're extrapolating way out to the future. And I think it needs a continued conversation down the road.
Yeah, well, Brad, thank you very much for being part of our episode here. It was really nice to be hearing from you, and you really like talking.
You already knew that, Felipe.
Yeah.
So, Brad, where can everybody go to download Off the Tracks?
So, offthetracksmovie.com, and for people listening to this, the code OTT. What is your guys' show?
GAG.
Yeah, GAG. OTTGAG will get you $1 off the regular version or $5 off the bonus feature edition, which has extended interviews, and I'm going to be adding features to that through VHX.TV. If you go to offthetracksmovie.com, you can figure all that out.
Does that download include your original project files? Ooh.
Actually,
boom, burned.
Actually, if you go to motionvfx.com, you can get the titles that were used in Off the Tracks, the templates, for free. So
that's called deflection, you know.
Yes. It's too much data to share for everybody.
Okay, Brad. thank you very much. I just
Brad.
wanted to say, everyone that's listening to this, I know that a lot of you are listening on podcasts, on iTunes. We do have a YouTube channel, and on our YouTube channel, you can see all our camera setups. We do set up our cameras here. So we have Gabe, we have myself, and we have our guest, Brad, that also set up a camera. So all our episodes are available on YouTube. So you can check us out there. You just look for Get a Grip, and you should be able to find within the first 10 pages. And of course, if you like this video, click the like button, subscribe, click on the bell there, and I guess that's it. Leave your comments. We like to hear from you, and I guess that's it, right, guys? So thank you very
Bye,
much,
everyone.
and